I used Reddit like it was a stage. I treated every post like a performance designed to pull people in and keep them reacting for as long as possible. I didn't go there to read casually because I was always thinking about what I could write next and how far I could push people before they started questioning things. I learned very quickly that if the story sounded real enough, people wouldn't just read it, but would also feel involved in it. And that involvement turned into comments, messages, and attention that felt very addictive after a while. I wasn't writing fiction in the way people expect, because I built everything to look like something that actually happened. At first, I kept things simple and believable, but over time I noticed that darker stories got stronger reactions, so I started leaning into that direction without thinking too much about the consequences. I mixed small, real details with bigger lies, and that made everything harder to question. I liked watching people argue, give advice, and try to solve situations that never existed. Then I wrote a story about my boyfriend, and that was the moment everything stopped being contained. My boyfriend was not abusive at all, and that is the part that matters most, because everything I wrote about him online was completely false and built only to get reactions. He was calm, respectable, and predictable, which made him useless for the kind of content I wanted to create. So I turned him into something else in my post, describing him as someone controlling and dangerous, and I added specific situations that made the story feel detailed and real. I wrote about things he never did, using a tone that made it sound like I was hiding something serious. But he always remained anonymous. I created a fictional character. The response was immediate and intense, and it gave me exactly what I was looking for, because people reacted with concern, anger, and urgency. Some told me to leave him, others shared their own experiences, and a few asked questions that made the story feel even more alive. There was one user who stood out more than the others, because he had been following my posts for months and always reacted strongly, but this time his messages felt different. He kept asking if I was safe, and his tone felt more personal than anything I'd seen before. I ignored him like I ignored everyone else, because responding would break the illusion I had created, and I believed that keeping distance was the best way to stay in control. I was wrong about that. A few days after I posted that story, I started receiving direct messages from him that felt more focused and more serious. When I opened the message from that user, I expected something similar to what he had written before, but what I saw made me stop and read it more than once. He wrote that he had found him, and he didn't explain anything else, which made the message feel heavier than it should have. I tried to dismiss it as someone getting too involved in a story, but I couldn't ignore the way it stayed in my head after I closed the app and tried to move on. I walked around my apartment, checked the time, and kept thinking about what he meant. Later that night, I called my boyfriend because we had plans, and he didn't answer, which was unusual enough to make me call again without waiting. I sent messages and watched my phone, expecting a reply that never came. Before doing anything else, I sat down and listened to the quiet in my apartment. I kept checking my phone, trying to stay calm while my thoughts kept circling the same idea. I opened Reddit again, and there was another message from him, waiting for me. "He won't hurt you ever again." I read it slowly, then again trying to understand if this was still part of the same situation I thought I controlled, or if something had already gone too far. I stayed awake that entire night, moving between my phone and the door. I kept calling him, checking his accounts and refreshing everything without seeing any change. Then finally, someone knocked on my door. I checked through the peephole and saw nothing, which made me wait there longer than I should have, expecting someone to move into view. After a few seconds, I noticed an envelope on the floor outside the door. I opened the door, picked up the envelope, and closed it again quickly, locking it before stepping back. The weight of it felt wrong for something that looked so simple, and that detail stayed in my mind as I opened it. Inside there was a letter and a piece of fabric that I recognized immediately, even though I tried to convince myself I was mistaken. "You're safe now. I saw everything you wrote. He won't ever hurt you again. You're free now." I read the lines carefully, then looked at the fabric again, recognizing the shirt it came from and understanding what that meant before I wanted to accept it. The drive to his place felt disconnected from everything else. I was moving through the city without really seeing it, focused only on the letter and the messages. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to find a way to make it less real. Before going inside his building, I stood outside for a moment, trying to slow down enough to think clearly about what I was about to find. The place looked normal, and that made everything feel worse. I walked to his door and stopped before knocking, listening for any sound that could tell me he was inside and alive. There was nothing, and that silence felt heavier the longer I stood there. I knocked, waited, then knocked again, and there was no response. I tried the handle and felt it move without resistance. I hesitated before opening the door, knowing that whatever was inside would confirm everything I was trying to deny. When I stepped in, I noticed the smell first, and it made me stop before moving any further into the apartment. I walked slowly, looking around, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then I saw him on the floor, and I understood immediately what had happened, even though part of me refused to accept it. I looked at the wall after that, and the message written there made everything connect in the worst possible way. "You are free." The letters were uneven and messy, and that made them feel more real than anything else in the room. The police arrived and took control of the situation, moving through the apartment and asking questions. They kept me in one place while they worked, and I answered what I could. When they asked about the letter, I showed it to them, and they read it carefully before asking if I knew who sent it. I said no because I didn't know who he was beyond a username and a pattern of messages. Before answering their next question, I looked at my phone and saw another message from the same account, which made me hesitate before opening it while they were still in the room. "I did what you couldn't. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm watching, in case he comes back." I showed them the messages after that, because hiding them didn't make sense anymore, and I realized that I'd already lost control long before this moment. When they asked why someone would believe something like that, I explained what I had been doing online, and I could see the shift in their expressions as they understood how the story connected to what had happened. They never found him, and that's the part that stays with me, because it means he's still out there, somewhere, and I have no way of knowing what he's thinking or what he might do next. The account disappeared, and every attempt to trace it led nowhere. I deleted everything I'd written, but that didn't erase what happened, and people still talk about the story in places I avoid. I stopped writing completely, because I don't trust what can come from it anymore. Sometimes I still receive messages from new accounts, and they all feel similar, like they're coming from someone who's been watching for a long time. I don't reply, and I avoid opening them whenever I can. There's one message I haven't opened yet, and I can see part of it without clicking on it, which makes it harder to ignore. "Tell me, who deserves it next?"
You want to see something real? I spent most of my time on Reddit, and not in a normal way. I was there to mess with people and get reactions out of them. I had a username that people recognized, and whenever I entered a live stream, it didn't take long before things started to shift, because I knew how to push people without saying anything complicated. I didn't care who was on the other side of the screen, because to me it was just content, just something to pass time, and I treated every stream like a chance to make something happen. If someone looked nervous or unstable, I stayed longer, because those were the streams that could turn into something bigger if the chat pushed hard enough. Other users followed my comments and joined in, and that made everything easier because I didn't have to carry the whole thing alone. It became a pattern where I would start something and others would build on it, and before long, the stream would be completely out of control. I never thought about what happened after I closed the tab, because for me, everything ended when I left, and that made it easy to keep doing the same thing every day without thinking twice. That night I found a stream with almost no viewers, and the title looked rushed, like the person didn't plan it, which usually meant they were already in a bad place before going live. The guy on camera looked disorganized, like he couldn't hold a thought for more than a few seconds, and he kept stopping mid-sentence as if he forgot what he was trying to say. The lighting was low and uneven, and his face was the only clear thing when he leaned closer to the screen, which made it easier to see how unstable he looked. He kept trying to explain something, but nothing came out clearly, and the silence in the chat made it obvious that people were waiting for something to happen. A few users started typing, some asking if he was okay, but that never lasts long because it only takes one person to change the tone completely. I watched for a moment without typing, trying to understand how far gone he was, and it didn't take long to see that he was exactly the kind of person that could break under pressure. Before I typed anything, he leaned forward and started talking faster, like he was trying to fix what he already messed up, and the chat stayed quiet just long enough to build that awkward pause where everyone waits for someone to say something. That was when I stepped in. I wrote, "This doesn't make any sense. Why are you even live right now? Say something clear for once." The reaction was immediate, and other users started repeating the same tone, which shifted the entire mood of the stream within seconds. He read the comments out loud, and when he reached mine, he stopped talking and stared at the screen longer than before, which made it clear he was taking it personally even if he tried to act like he wasn't affected. His voice changed when he answered, and he forced a calm tone that didn't hold for long. "I'm just trying to talk." That answer made things worse because it showed he wasn't in control, and the chat responded immediately with more pressure. "Then talk properly. Nobody understands you. This is hard to watch." I added more comments, keeping them simple and direct. "You don't even know what you're saying." There was a pause where he didn't speak, and instead of leaving, he stayed there reading everything, which made the situation worse because the chat kept growing and the comments became more aggressive with every second. A few users tried to calm things down, but their messages disappeared under the rest. He started talking again, but now he was rushing and repeating himself like he was trying to prove something that nobody accepted. I just needed someone to listen. That line didn't help him, and instead, it triggered more comments. "We are listening, and this is bad. You wanted attention, and now you have it. Keep going. This is getting interesting." Before anything escalated further, he leaned back and went quiet again, and the way he stared at the screen changed, because now he wasn't reacting. He was absorbing everything in a way that made it clear he was getting overwhelmed. When he stood up and left the frame for a moment, the chat slowed down because people were waiting to see what he would do next, and when he came back, he was holding something that changed the tone instantly. It was a knife. The chat exploded, but the reactions were mixed because some users started telling him to stop, while others kept pushing like it was still part of the same joke. I didn't change my tone because I didn't believe he was serious. "You're not going to do anything. Put it down and stop acting." He looked directly at the screen, and this time his expression was focused in a way that made a few people hesitate. "You think I won't?" His voice sounded different, but the chat didn't slow down. "Do it then. Stop wasting time. This is fake." I added another comment. "You just want attention." There was a pause where he stood still holding the knife, and the way he read the chat made it clear he was taking in every message. When he spoke again, He wasn't explaining anything. He was responding. I tried to talk, and you turned it into this. Some users started telling him to calm down, but others pushed harder. Nobody forced you to go live. If you mean it, then prove it before the next moment. He adjusted the camera so more of the room was visible, and that movement made it clear he wanted people to see everything. He stepped closer and raised the knife slightly, and his breathing changed enough to show he was losing control. You want to see something real? He didn't move right away, and that pause stretched longer than expected, which made the chat unstable because people started typing faster and more aggressively. Some told him to stop, but others kept pushing, and the mix of reactions made everything worse. Then he dragged the blade across his arm, but it wasn't enough, and he looked at it like he expected something different. The chat reacted instantly. "That's nothing, you're faking it, go deeper," I typed again. That didn't count. He nodded slightly, like he agreed, and then he adjusted his grip and did it again with more force. His reaction changed this time, and he pulled back quickly, but the camera caught everything clearly. Some users started to panic and told him to stop, but others kept pushing, and the chat became chaotic. "Stop now, this is serious. Keep going, don't stop. Show us you mean it, before the next action." He leaned closer to the camera, and his expression looked fixed, like he had already decided what he was going to do. Watch closely. He repositioned the knife and didn't hesitate this time. What happened next was not controlled because he started the motion and struggled midway, like his body resisted, but he forced it anyway. The chair moved and hit the wall, and the camera shifted slightly but didn't hide what was happening. The chat kept moving, and even when people realized it was real, the messages didn't stop, and everything became unreadable. The stream didn't end immediately, and the camera stayed on while showing part of the floor and desk, and the chat kept updating with messages that shifted from jokes to confusion and panic. Some users asked if it was real, while others kept reacting like it was still part of the same performance. I didn't type anything after that, and I just stared at the screen while trying to process what I'd seen. But I kept telling myself it wasn't real, because that felt easier than accepting it. After a while, the stream cut without warning and the screen went blank, which made everything feel worse because there was no clear ending. I stayed there for a long time without moving, and I didn't open another tab or check anything else because I didn't know what to do with what I had just seen. When I finally closed the laptop, I tried to move on like I always did. I went to sleep without checking anything else, and I avoided thinking about it by telling myself it was staged. A few days later, I searched for it again because the doubt didn't go away, and I needed to confirm whether it was real. After some digging, I found an article that matched everything. The name was real, the location was real, and it confirmed that he went live and died during the stream, and there were screenshots of the chat. My comments were there. Before opening Reddit again, I hesitated longer than usual because I didn't know what I would find. When I finally opened it, I scrolled until I found a live stream with no title and no viewers. Before clicking, I stared at it longer than expected, and something about it didn't feel right, but I clicked anyway. The screen was completely black and there was no sound, but the chat was visible. Then a message appeared. "You're still watching?" I didn't respond. Another message appeared. Those were the messages I'd written in the chat. The screen flickered and a face appeared for a moment before disappearing, and even though it wasn't clear, I recognized it. The chat updated again. I closed the laptop, but my phone lit up seconds later with the same stream still running, and the chat kept updating even though I wasn't typing. "Wherever you are, please forgive me and stop tormenting me like this.